strategy,
design,
marketing,
UX,
digital.
development.
This is Agencies That Build. This show is dedicated to leaders and teams that design and deploy in the digital world. My name is Jessie, and I'm a marketer and an agency owner.
And I'm Varun. I'm not a marketer, but a coder and an agency partner.
This show is sponsored by Together We Ship.
On a mission to help agencies grow.
All right, here we are. Varun, my friend, how are you today?
I'm good. I am energized. Before the call, I was thinking, I every morning I fill up this journal in which one question is usually what energizes me. So today I mentioned sleep. Sleep energizes me, but I think just before the call, I was going through our today's guest and reading through that, and then it reminded me, look, this is what energizes me is the conversation that we have with the people like these. That's what really give me the energy. So I'm very excited. Let's get started. Tell us, who do we have today?
Excellent. Today, I would agree with you. I actually really look forward to these chats as well. Everyone has a different perspective. So today, our guest has worn a number of hats: software developer, project manager, agile coach, salesperson, entrepreneur. The list goes on. He has over 20 years of experience. He's passionate about software development, the software development industry. He has grown his company to over 60 consultants and multi-millions in revenue. I won't give a specific number. He can choose to give that if he'd like. And he's got a really interesting business model too. He's 100% employee owned and 100% remote, which we'll get into a little bit here in a minute. President and CEO of Test Double, Todd Kaufman. Todd, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
The episode.
I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
No problem. So let's start off by asking this question, like we do on most of our episodes. What is some bogus misconception, some sort of strategy that you'd like to bust, some sort of myth or something you'd like to set the record straight on? What do you got for us today?
Yeah, I feel like the last couple of years have helped me debunk this myth quite a bit. But I think the myth that you have to be in an office space to be productive in the software industry is completely bogus. I think at this point, almost everyone was forced to at least work remotely in our industry over the last couple of years for varying points. People are going back to the offices now. And I really just I don't think it's a more productive environment for the vast majority of software developers that we come in contact with. I think they all prefer the flexibility, the autonomy, and really the level of focus that they get working remotely.
How did you guys get into working remotely? I mean, we've talked to a lot of, as part of the podcast, obviously throughout the pandemic, and then after and before, we've talked to a lot of people about the struggles with going remote, how they balance that, how they deal with it from a cultural perspective. But, from you guys have been 100% remote as we've chatted. Let me start by asking, why what drew that, why'd you start that way? I guess, what was the thought process behind it? If you can talk a little bit about how you got there.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to rewrite history and, say that myself and my co-founder, Justin Searles, saw this coming, and that we were great visionaries and knew that our industry was eventually going to be largely remote. But really, we were, pretty fiscally conservative in the early days of our company. So we resisted the urge to spend money on anything until we felt like it was required. And that was 10 years ago. So at that time, we maybe didn't have as good a bandwidth. We maybe didn't have as much tooling, et cetera, as we do now to support remote work. So at the time, we would just, drive back and forth to each other's houses and work because it was just the two of us. As we started, hiring and bringing more people into the company, we found that the model of work from home really resonated with them, and that they had been trapped in the big cube farms of the giant insurance companies and banks for a number of years. And really, once they started working remotely, they're like, oh yeah, I can't imagine working any other way. So once we kind of found that, yeah, that was really how every one of us liked working, we catered to that. We decided that, hey, we are a remote first company, and we'll compensate people if they're going into a co-working space, because I acknowledge like remote work isn't 100% great and 0% like bad. There are trade-offs, as with everything. But with us, we want people to work where they best operate, where they're most focused, most energized, et cetera. So we give them the choice of working wherever they like.
So you're saying that when you started the company, you were remote from the very beginning, like you and your co-founder were pretty much like doing the idea of remote working from home. And then when you hired your first employees, that's how you started. Like you gave them the option, like there is no office space here. Like you are going to join us and going to work from home. How did that, what kind of response did you get when you spoke to multiple people? Because this is 10 years ago, like now it is very common, but 10 years ago, I imagine it was not very straightforward, acceptable kind of situation. I mean,
Yeah.
how was the experience?
I think we made it to about our fifth full-time employee before we had someone who really felt like they worked a lot better in office environments. And they felt like, they weren't someone who was 100% aligned with just working remotely days on end. The rest of us were all pretty comfortable with it. And I had worked remotely for, I don't know, 2 years, I think, before starting the company. So I was already pretty comfortable with it as well. And we could kind of share a little bit about what works and what doesn't with the people coming in. But that fifth person, they also embraced the freedom of it. We were all largely in Central Ohio is where we got started. As a remote company, they're the first ones to ask, like, hey, would it be okay if I moved to Chicago? And we're like, I don't care where you live. Like, I don't care where you work. Like, these are the expectations from our clients. Like, figure it out. So they were able to move to Chicago, and they actually would go into the office of one of our competitors, our friendly competitors, and actually just kind of squat in their offices. So it helped us to build relationships with some other people as well.
So what did work for you when it comes to the remote? Like from the beginning, what type of message or what processes did you set up for them to be successful and stay successful?
Or even key tools. I would add key tools into that,
Sure.
Yeah. Good internet connections is a must. And that's not always easily accessible. We actually had another one of our first 10 hires move to, kind of the remote, like wilderness of Colorado, and figuring out how to work with Wi-Fi and good connectivity there was a challenge for a while, but he was able to do it as well. I think the biggest stuff with us, I think the number one concession that you make is connectivity. So you tend to feel like you're not part of the team because you're not coming in and, having those casual conversations by the water cooler, or, just going out for lunch ad hoc with a handful of your team. Those things don't tend to happen. So you have to be pretty deliberate about building in that connectivity in other ways. So we actually implemented a little automated bot that just pairs you up with somebody on a weekly basis. So we call it coffee time, where it literally just encourages you to go find 30 minutes on the other person's calendar once a week and talk about anything. Like, it can be work, sure, but we encourage you to talk about, what you did over the weekend, movies you saw, et cetera, hobbies that you have. And that's been great for just like finding out a little bit more about your coworkers and who they are. We started doing company retreats as well pretty early on. So in normal days, which we're still trying to get back to, we'll do 2 retreats a year, and where we bring everybody together. And some of that is like strategizing on the business, sharing kind of what our accomplishments are, where we're headed next, et cetera. But a good portion of it was just kind of getting away from client-focused work and connecting with your team. Getting to know each other better, and really just kind of understanding who's on the other side of the Zoom call, 5 days a week that you're working with. So that's been some of the stuff that's worked out really well. We do a weekly meeting as well, where it's just kind of free flowing topics where we'd at least get to see each other and talk about, whatever was coming up. So those things I think are critical. You have to build in the connectedness piece. Otherwise, I think it just tends to feel like a cooperative of independent consultants, which isn't what we wanted to build.
You
You
also
tried.
mentioned,
Oh, you go,
sorry,
Varun.
okay. You also mentioned that right from the beginning, the expectations with the clients were pretty much set. Like they know what clients are expecting, and employees know what clients are expecting. So clients already knew that the team that they're working with are remote from the beginning, right? What type of engagement model? I'm trying to get into a little more into the process of your company specifically, like what type of clients you have that you work with, what type of development methodologies that you follow that allowed your remote team to be successful.
Yeah, I think the clients haven't always been 100% accommodating of remote work either. We've lost out on bigger opportunities that just didn't feel like they wanted a partner coming in who would be remote. And I think it's understandable in some sense. A lot of companies, I think, want you to be inside their office spaces, and then you go in there and everyone has headphones on. No one's communicating via any other means than Slack, and it feels just like working from home. So I think that there are valid reasons. I think there are certain types of projects that, especially in the early phases, may be a little bit more collaborative and a little bit more productive if everybody's kind of in a single space working in them. We typically are working in an integrated model. So we're not an agency that is typically, hey, we have this idea for an MVP, build it and ship it to us, and then we'll go take it from there. Instead, we're usually meeting companies who are scaling. So they've already had their first, kind of couple of rounds of funding. They are growing. They're experiencing all of those challenges of scale that tends to hit companies that are successful at about that Series C round. So that tends to be what types of projects we work on. A lot of that is pairing up with our client personnel. So it helps us come up to speed faster on their business domain, their code base, et cetera. And it also allows us to share a lot of our experience to hopefully leave their development team in a better state than we found them. And that's always our goal. So that model is probably one of the more difficult ones to work remotely in, because you're not side by side with somebody else that you're trying to show how to do TDD or whatnot. That's been a little bit more challenging. There's been plenty of times where we go on site for the first week or so to kick off the engagement, and it allows us to build up those relationships a little bit more. So then when you're commenting on a pull request or something like that, it's not just some stranger from the internet like criticizing your work. It's someone that you've got to know a little bit better. So we've already kind of established a little bit of that trust, and that tends to go a long way. But it's a really good question. I think the type of consulting that we do is actually the least conducive to remote work, but we've just gotten more deliberate and better about it throughout the years, so it's still wildly successful.
Yeah, it is pretty strange to hear the model in which you mentioned your team works, and the way you are making it work in remote is pretty interesting too. So most of the projects that you do are more like time and material engagements versus fixed costs, because you are basically part of your client's team. So it is like, we will be with you until you need us, something
Correct.
on those lines, right?
Yeah, so we don't do fixed bid, fixed scope projects. I think Venkat Subramaniam wrote in one of his books that like fixed bids are broken promises, and it's always kind of resonated with my experience. You have to get really, really good at estimating uncertain things for that to work well. So instead, we don't want the client to experience all the risk either. So what we do is we do open-ended contracts. So our clients, any one of our clients can fire us with a 7-day notice. That keeps a healthy pressure on us to continue adding value. If we're not adding value, like I'm going to be encouraging them to ramp our team down. Like it's just what makes sense. But the flip side is it's a lower barrier of entry too. So clients don't feel like they need to procure budget for $500,000 to engage with our team. They can get started with just a couple of consultants, for as little as 10 weeks to try and make progress against one of their objectives, and that can be a much lower spend. But we found that typically once clients start working with our consultants, we tend to be pretty sticky. They tend to see a lot of value, and they find other work for us. So that's worked out really well for us.
why? Like, how does it work out? I mean, so I totally get the idea. I want to sell that all the time. Like, I have a client who hires us for the time without worrying about time and cost, or like the fixed cost, without knowing what will they end up spending, right? It's not an easy sell. So tell me, like, what is your secret sauce? Like, how are you able to sell the
Well,
open-ended?
I'm not going to give away all my secrets today, just so you know. But no, I think what we've seen work is honestly trying to be respectful and operate in our clients' best interests. So that includes budget. So it's not that we want to ignore their budget by any means. We want to understand what their budget is. We want to be good stewards of their funds. If we see, hey, we're 50% through this budget, but we've only accomplished 30% of the objective, like we're probably going to call timeout, bring the right people back into the room, and like, let's start talking about this. Like, can we shrink scope? Can we, eliminate some features? Can we move more efficiently in some way, shape, or form? Or should we, procure more budget to really try to get this thing over the line? We tend to voice those concerns early on projects so that people still have enough time to make a decision that kind of brings this thing in. We really adopt an agile mindset, and it's not the big, Scrum or SAFe approaches or anything like that. It's more of just the original mindset of agile, which was embrace change, right? Like, let's not throw away plans. We want to do some planning. We just don't want to be beholden to it when, we're at the most uncertain point of a project. We want to iterate, get feedback, and keep adjusting. So I think that model works well for almost all software projects. If you're not doing that and you're one of our clients, our team's going to be gradually guiding you toward it, right? I think that piece of always influencing our clients, trying to get them to a better state, you make a lot of little changes over the course of a year-long engagement, you tend to have an outsized impact. And I think clients see that, so they keep asking us for more.
Do you find that when you're trying to procure clients and your differentiators in the market in terms of how you're pitching this model to, say, somebody who's more of a project based rather than time and materials, do you find that I'm trying to figure out how to word the question in an open-ended manner, but maybe I'll just get to the point where do people bring you in instead of like another employee hire? I'd love to hear a little bit about the client engagement from a thought process standpoint, and in terms of how, and again, don't reveal a little secret sauce, maybe.
Sure.
In this, because I feel like this is something a lot of agencies struggle with. Do we do it this way? Do we do it project based? Because then you have to have change order conversations. Neither one is great, but both can be awesome if you do it correctly. So would love to hear a little bit about your experience there.
Yeah, we've done both. So we've done a mixture of consulting. We call it staff integration, is what I've been previously describing. Most people think of it as staff augmentation, but that paints a vivid picture for our team of like cube farms in a bank where you're just told what to do, and it's kind of a miserable environment. So we're trying to apply a little bit of marketing salve to that to make it sound a little bit nicer. But we've done product delivery as well. We've done assessments, we've done training, et cetera, for clients. We really try to help in whatever way we can with those clients. When we run into product delivery focused companies and clients are comparing us to them, I almost encourage them to go with those companies. Those companies are typically more well-versed at that discovery phase, which is really key, because that's where you really unlock, okay, how big is this thing? Are we going to be a good solution for your expectations or not? And, ideally the ones with really good UI, UX firms or UI, UX personnel are firms that are well positioned to paint a vivid picture of what this thing's going to look like for clients. And that traditionally hasn't been us. We've partnered with some companies that are really, really good at UI, UX. And as a set of specialists, we provide a pretty comprehensive, valuable solution there. But oftentimes, like, we're happier kind of going after a lot of those integration model like work. It winds up being some of the bigger code bases in the world. It winds up being some of the like harder problems, and we tend to have an outsized impact on the teams that we work with there. So our mission is to improve how the world builds software. say a small product delivery engagement, 2 people for 3 months, we're not going to turn our nose up at that or anything. We're not elitist. But like really what we're doing in that model is showing a business owner or a stakeholder or a product owner, hey, here's a healthy like way to work with a software delivery team. Your impact's kind of constrained at that point.
Yeah.
When we deploy at some of our biggest engagements right now, we're key members of, 100-person engineering teams, and we're helping to like, really provide a lot of that shift in mentality so that everybody in that organization improves. And hopefully that's long lasting after we're gone as well. Those tend to just be the engagements that we feel like we have a bigger impact on.
You said something interesting, because I know you guys can scale up or down depending on the way that you work with clients. Something we ask a lot of agency owners is, do you say no? Do you say no to projects that come in? I think with your business model, it's an interesting, I would ask you the same question. Is there a point where you're like, that's not quite the right fit for us, or it's not big enough project, or the investment is, or are you open kind of saying yes, and you can structure those engagements however feels right for you based off the interesting work?
Yeah, I think that what we've started prioritizing. So right now we have more sales than we have people. So we've been in an oversold capacity for 18 months at this point. Things kind of rebounded quickly post-COVID. Well, I shouldn't say post-COVID, but as 2020 was winding down.
Post-dramatic COVID, how about that?
Yeah, I guess post first wave of COVID.
Yeah.
And from there, we've just had to start being a lot more choosy, and we're doing it a little bit selfishly right now. So right now, what we're saying is, okay, clients who are interested in deploying bigger teams, those are ones where we're going to have a bigger impact. Let's go after those things. Maybe clients that are expanding in technology or in industries that we care about and we're interested in helping within, maybe we'll prioritize those higher. So we've done a lot of work in the energy space, helping to build systems that, we're hopeful allow for more renewable energy sources to power our grid in the future. That means something to us, right? Like that's interesting. Our team likes working in Ruby Rails. We do a lot of work there, but they're also interested in Golang. They're also interested in Elixir. So when we see those opportunities come in, we can prioritize those higher as well. But we've told a variety of clients that we're not a fit either because of maybe unrealistic expectations is probably the most common cause. Someone has, hey, I want to build this thing, but for this industry, and my budget's $50K, and they're describing a $250,000 problem. Like we'll let them know, hey, we think you have a $250,000 problem. We wish you the best. We're not a good fit. We can't do it for $50K. Or maybe they're a little bit less open to change and improvement. And those tend to be, just kind of butts and seats environments. And we know that's not going to be where our team wants to work. And ultimately right now, it's just really, a really, challenging market for software talents. We recognize if we don't find projects that our people want to work in, they're going to find them themselves, whether it's at Testable or elsewhere.
It's pretty interesting and very cool to hear that you are focusing so much on what do your employees want to work on, and we take on projects that inspires them, because it's so right. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the team which helps companies grow. So you need to align, everybody in the company needs to be aligned with a common vision. And if that vision is to, in your case, at least for the energy sector, working on the project that helps with the sustainable future, that makes so much sense. Besides giving them the type of work they want to work on, what else do you do to keep them inspired and motivated, and things that keep them going and stay with you? Because you are like 85 people now. It's a decent size, and to keep them fulfilled,
retained, happy.
Yep. Yeah, I think this is a question a lot of business owners are asking themselves in our space right now. We started the company really because we read Drive by Daniel Pink, and it resonated so loudly with us that we felt like we didn't have autonomy, mastery, and purpose at our current company the way the book described. So we decided to build it. And, it took us a while to clarify what those things meant for test double. So, we were probably, in our first few years of running the business, people would be like, well, what's test double do? Why are you in business? We're like, we're just trying to keep the lights on, right? Like we're just trying to make sure we have enough runway to keep people employed. But after a while, that gets pretty old. Like you start realizing, hey, if I'm going to put in all this effort to start this business, it needs to have an outsized impact. So that's when we both kind of came up with, hey, improving this broken industry of software development, that is what motivates me. That's the win in my sales. So we had our purpose. Autonomy, we've always been pretty focused on. We didn't become, remote because we wanted to be remote. We were remote because we wanted people to be autonomous. We wanted the people closest to the problems to be the ones to solve them. So if that meant figuring out the balance of where you work best and how you can achieve focus while balancing all the other stuff in your life, and that led you to a remote, awesome. That's what we want there too. Mastery is the piece that we're leaning into harder these days. I think what's great and also horrible about our industry is that it's constantly changing and evolving. Sometimes change just for change's sake. Other times we see some significant improvements in how we work. And if you don't keep up with that, you pretty quickly fall behind. So I think consulting one is a great avenue for that because you get a lot of different challenges. So instead of you becoming a business domain expert at some product company for 5 years, you're probably working at 10 different clients in that same period of time at a consulting organization. So you get a lot of variety. Further, you start to see the same patterns emerge and you start building up the toolkit for addressing those patterns. So I think really leaning into that, how do we support accelerating the growth of our people in their careers? If we are really exceptional at that, I don't think people will look to go elsewhere until it's a situation where they've almost graduated beyond what test double can provide. And that's great. If that's the outcome for why someone leaves, I'm all for it.
It's something we hear often from agency owners too, in terms of providing environments where people can learn and grow, and then and nobody has said it this directly, but it's, when they outgrow you. But the best part about that is when they outgrow you, they take you with them because they're going to need an agency.
Yeah. Who do they think of to call when they run into some challenges then, right? Yeah, I think that's a great outcome. I mean, if test double propelled 150 experts within software who wound up starting their own businesses because we're also building in the financial acumen to do so, I would love for that to be the outcome. I think that would be phenomenal. So yeah, I think that, people don't want to be termed an up and out organization. I don't think of us that way. I think the path to really become excellent within software and especially within consulting is a long one. It's a, 10, 20-year path at times. So I hope we have people who stick around here for 10, 15, 20 years, no doubt. But if they ever are feeling like they're not growing, they're plateauing in their career, yeah, I think we'd all try to figure out a way for them to find what's next in their career.
When you guys have a pretty interesting staffing model anyways, in terms of your mix of full-time versus subs, if I'm understanding correctly, one of the things that I know we talked about prior to us recording that I want to ask pretty bluntly is you guys made a pretty big shift in the middle of that. What are we calling it? The first wave of COVID, in terms of moving to employee owned. We'd love to kind of hear a little bit about the thought process there, how you got into it. If you're open to sharing some of that story, maybe a little bit more of the secret sauce.
Yeah, definitely. That's the other piece that's really difficult to keep up with, especially the shift that happened from COVID that I think none of us were prepared for was all of a sudden, all of these West Coast VC-backed product companies are now remote. So the competition for the software developer in Columbus, Ohio is really, really intense. So it was well timed in the sense that we feel like we need to have an equity option for our people. If we don't, we're just going to get left behind by a lot of these kind of VC-backed companies. The timing itself was not fantastic. So, I mean, we spent all of 2019, we've had this vision for a while that we didn't ever want to be, the type of owners or founders who are standing on the backs of others. So when we felt that, really the vast majority of the value of Test Double was generated by our team, they should be the ones receiving that value in the form of profitability and compensation. And we'd had profit sharing, kind of plans and bonuses and stuff in place in the past to try and close that gap. But as we started looking at, how equity also affects the ability for, owners to exit, for a more, holistic view on what the exit strategy was for the business, et cetera, it started to feel like the ESOP really sang to us. Like it made a lot of sense. People didn't need to contribute cash, so they were able to just receive shares on an annual basis. And some owners will just transition the company via sale of the shares, and that's okay, except that it's a little bit inequitable. So if Varun's, grandmother left him $750,000, but Varun maybe isn't our, best contributor, do we really want Varun to have such an outsized stake in the equity of the company? Strictly hypothetical. I'm sure you're a fantastic contributor, Varun. But that's kind of, and similarly, if someone's a single parent who didn't have good credit, who is struggling to make ends meet, did we want them left out of an opportunity to own an outcome in this business? We felt like that was probably key, first and foremost, why ESOP made sense. But there's a lot of other reasons. I mean, it's a third party does the valuation every year. So my hands are really tied. There's nothing I can do to try and artificially inflate the value of the company or anything like that. It's all done by a third party. The other pieces, the company doesn't pay as 100% ESOP that is an S corp. We don't pay any federal income tax or state income tax. So that's 20 to 25% of our profit that stays in the business. All those things just seemed like a really good approach for us. But yeah, it was hard because it's also expensive to get off the ground. And we closed April 30th of 2020. So the same month where we're getting a lot of notices from clients that, hey, we're ending the project early, or hey, we need to talk about rates or one of these other things, we were investing, a pretty sizable amount to getting the ESOP off the ground. So yeah, it was a little bit terrifying in the early going, but we're starting to see a lot of the fruits of that labor. We just had our valuation completed again this year, and I'm starting to see statements for our employees grow and grow. So it's an exciting time to be here for sure.
How do employees get the visibility, and if they get the visibility about the sales pipeline, the future of the business and stuff? I know they see the profits and all, because it is open books now, but what does future look like for them, for the company where they are part owner? How do you do that?
Yeah, and it's kind of similar to I own shares of Apple. I don't really get to tell Tim Cook what he should be doing, right? I'm along for the ride a little bit in that case. Similarly,
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. Similarly, our people, they do have a vote should it come to an M&A situation, right? So if Test Double was going to be acquired, something like that, it would actually go to a vote. So they have a little bit more, than most, but ultimately, the decisions about where we're headed as a company and how we get there, et cetera, I think largely our leadership team is trying to kind of build a high level plan for what we think makes sense. And that's based off our vision, right? Where we want to be in 3 to 5 years. We do that on an annual basis. We invite people who are interested in participating to get involved. So if you're really passionate about, hey, I think Test Double should be whatever, building courseware to help train people in a specific technology, awesome. Let's talk about that, right? Let's get you involved in our services plan or maybe our marketing plan so that you can chime in with why you think this is so valuable, and we'll help you kind of build out what that plan will look like. And it's not to say that we'll do that stuff 100% of the time, but we at least want to, encourage people to have a voice in the direction that this company is going. So yeah, we have to communicate, I think, across those pieces consistently. And it's honestly probably not my strongest suit. So we should be communicating though about where are we going with recruiting? Where are we going with, sales and marketing? What do we see the next 3, 6 months, 9 months shaping up as? It's hard because as you all probably know, like our businesses are always evolving. So it's sometimes tough to keep up communication with what's actually happening in the business at any given point.
It sounds like you've built an environment though too, where it allows people to explore some of those interests they may not want to risk exploring on their own, an environment where you can ask questions and learn from an entrepreneurial situation. You both are entrepreneurs, you and your co-founder, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah.
So, it sounds like you've built a place where, where it's open to a point, but people could be like, hey, can you tell me what this is? Or fill me in on this, and just have a little bit of sense of ownership and directional,
Yeah,
insight.
definitely. No, I think that's a huge piece of it. So even with like management of people, right? So sometimes some companies are, hey, you're doing such a great job as an IC, we're going to pull you into a management role now. And we may or may not give you training, may or may not give you a lot of support, but hey, just, here's your 10 direct reports. Good luck. And then, I was in that role, and 6 months later, I'm like,
may the force be with you.
yeah. 6 months later, I was like, wow, do I hate this role? Like all of the like tangible feedback I had building software, like where I felt like I was steadily making progress, like now I get none of that. Oh, and by the way, whenever something's like, broken, like it's my fault ultimately, even though I may not have the power to fix it. We allow people to, and that's a pretty jaded view of management. So please don't assume that that's like my complete thoughts on management, but it can be challenging, I think, for ICs to move into a management role. So we allow people to take on, say, 2 to 4 other consultants that they want to support and manage, and try it out for a year. Like, see how it feels. See if it feels like it should be 100% of your job, or maybe it should continue to be 10% of your job, or maybe it should be somewhere in between. And depending on the results of that, like depending on how you're doing, and also depending on your interests, like we can talk more about what that looks like as a career path. But you don't have to change companies to do that, right? You can get that experience. And conversely, we've had people like work with clients more directly, almost as account managers, and then come back and be like, yeah, I don't really like this. And it's like, okay, stop doing it.
It's a really good point that you make, because I think it's coming up more and more often. I'll say subtly, the Great Resignation and people changing jobs. I actually read a really interesting quote that speaks to that over the weekend, that was around, when you're a kid, you spend a lot of time trying a whole bunch of different stuff and you're satiating your curiosity, but all of a sudden you're being asked to be an adult and you have to go to work and go to school and make these decisions about who you're going to be when you grow up, and you don't get this opportunity to be able to explore and try. Like, I think you said it, part of our conversation was try before you buy. So this ability to be able to embrace, how people want to grow and manage their careers is probably another retention, opportunity for you guys from an employee standpoint.
I would hope so. I mean, I think I got into consulting for that reason. I was like, well, I don't know where I want to go next. I'll just do consulting for a while and see what appeals to me. Lo and behold, consulting really appealed to me. I like that more than I like working for product companies. So it
worked out well.
Yeah.
And so you guys you've tried, we ask all of our agencies this, you've tried an offshore model, you've tried outsourcing. Would love to hear a little bit about your experience there, especially it feeds into this try before you buy conversation. How did that work for you guys? What did you find that worked? What did you find that didn't work is, also the question on the table.
Yeah, I think that, ultimately we're a little bit limited by what our clients support. So we're constantly in these sales opportunities trying to expand the boundaries of how we could work with teams. And lately we're finding that, offshore may work pretty well in some models. And we've found some offshore talent that line up really well with how we work and what our capabilities are. So that's allowing us to explore that further, in this case, in Latin America. Canada doesn't really count. Canada's kind of same near shore, I guess. I don't know what you term them, but
North America.
Yeah, thank you. we've grown our Canadian presence a lot in the last couple of years, and I think some of that's a reflection of we've standardized salary bands, kind of irrespective of whether you're in the U.S. or Canada, and with the exchange rate and everything, like our salaries are really competitive in Canada. So I think some of that's just been sheer market forces, but also what we've really found is that most of our clients don't really care. What they want is some overlap of time zones. They want some amount of consistency in communication, and they want people that they can trust to do good work and deliver. And it's you can find those people all over the world. So that's worked out well for us, but it does embody that that experimentation mindset. We've tried to place a lot of little bets throughout the history of the company. Very rarely are we pushing all the chips in on the table.
You mentioned the client's expectations is to have, they don't care, which is, I think, very, very, we're hearing that a lot, and, it is becoming very common, especially in the last couple of years. But in your model, when you are integrating the teams with the client side on the client team, how does the offshore integration work, I guess? I mean, I'm assuming there is some someone who is managing a project, or client coordinator, or I don't know what you call, some called producers, someone of that sort leading from your side, and then adding the team from, some other country, and then they're interacting with the clients. And how does the whole process work?
Yeah, so it's a good point to make. So one, if the client is new to an offshore model, I would probably admit we're probably not the right company to immediately get you running with it just yet. So our experience is still somewhat limited with offshore. So we don't want to, presume that we can help you get there when we're still figuring out a little bit ourselves. But regardless of the engagement of where people are, we usually have at least at some level, like an executive contact from Test Double, likely myself or my co-founder, or a couple of other people in the company. Then we have a client service lead who's literally making sure the trains run on time, communication's effective. We'll conduct like retros or huddles internally about what's working, what's not. Even if there's different pockets working within the same company on different projects, we want to bring all of them together so that we kind of understand holistically, what are we seeing, what are opportunities for improvement, how do we approach those. I think that really it hasn't changed when we've worked with offshore consultants. It's largely stayed the same. And I would see that kind of continuing. Like, I think for us, the requirement would be some overlap of time zone and probably no issues with communicating in English, assuming that that's where our clients are at right now. We're on the cusp of working with some clients who are a lot better at working globally than we are. So I'm a little bit optimistic and hopeful that they'll actually kind of pull us into doing more of that work here in the future. I'm hopeful to learn from them.
It's always a good situation to be in.
Yep.
What would you say? I mean, we've talked a lot about how you guys grew, how you got into this. What would you say is the biggest mistake you've made, or one of the challenges that you're facing as you're running an agency? It's an opportunity to kind of, part of the chat is learning from each other. So I'm going to ask you and put you on the spot.
Yeah, it's definitely a fair question. That's a really long list. Like, I could probably come up with, 20 mistakes I've made this year so far. So to pinpoint one is the difficult part. I would say we've largely not been, so we want to be an example for others to follow in our industry, largely. We kind of aspire to that. And we're not in a few ways right now, probably the biggest of which is the diversity of our team. And it wasn't like we set out to create a team of all white dudes. Instead, what we did was, as two very privileged white co-founders starting the company, our biggest focus when we were hiring initially was we want to hire people we can trust from our networks, right? People that we had experience with hands-on. lo and behold, our networks looked a lot like we did. So those first few hires from within networks just kind of furthered the problem. And then guess what? Their networks looked a lot like we all did. So we kind of continued that. And we've been probably battling back against that since, we reached maybe 10 people in one of those first company retreats. Like somebody spoke up and was like, well, we have a diversity problem. And we all kind of looked around. We're like, yeah, we do. What's going on here? So I think that in our industry, especially, think about it day one, because we didn't. We thought about it, about 3 or 4 years in. And by then, we had already set ourselves up to have a really hard time affecting change. If you're like us and you're, kind of finding that you're now at a point where you really care about this and you want to make change, no, it's not going to be easy. No, it's not going to be like a check that you can write and all of a sudden everything's great. And you're probably going to make even more mistakes trying to remedy this. But we're starting to see some traction. So I think the ESOP's a good example of us becoming an equitable organization. We also now have salary bands that are public on all our job descriptions. And we're making offers to candidates where there's no negotiation. Like all of these things lead to it being a more equitable organization. It's not a situation where, hey, the best negotiator gets the best, salary at this point. Lo and behold, men tend to be more comfortable pressing for higher salaries, right? Now it's a situation where, hey, we have a lot of equitable policies and procedures within the company. We've had a focus on making sure we're a very inclusive company, having like employee resource groups and things like that. And now we're encouraging our recruiting team to start focusing on, in areas where we know there's more diverse talent than what we have currently. And we're starting to see results. So one, don't think that this is something you can delay on. Think about it day one. And if you didn't listen to the first piece of advice, then just know there's ways to kind of combat against it, but you got to apply a lot of effort as you go.
Nice. All right. So I'm going to shift gears in our questions. Tell us a little, we started off our chat prior to recording a little bit. Today is it's Marathon Monday here in Boston as we record this episode for those of you watching. So we were all chatting about it before we started recording, but you brought up an interesting, for those of you watching the video portion of this podcast, Todd's got some cool stuff on the wall. Tell us a little bit about you. How many marathons have you run? What's your, I'm going to go straight there because Lord knows I am not running any right now.
Neither am I right now, to be fair. It's amazing how quickly you can get out of race shape. That probably should have been more of my focus in 2020 was like, well, there's, nothing better to do. I should just go out and run and burn off some energy. Instead, I was trying to, make sure the business was doing well and whatnot. So it was just a big ball of stress.
Debate one way or another. So
yeah, but I've done 3 marathons. I've probably done, 15 half marathons or something like that, a number of 5Ks and 10Ks throughout the years. It's interesting the number of ideas we've had and oftentimes the clarity that you get when you're on a long run. So you kind of get the lizard brain occupied with like just the keeping the body moving and, just out on a trail, everything quiet. It's amazing how many times we've had like an idea or two that have led to us doing something with the business that's had an outsized impact. I think one of the more recent ones was actually during 2020. We wound up with a lot of people in between projects just because projects canceled and the sales pipeline dried up. So we started what we called Great Causes, where, if we're going to have people who are idle and we don't have anything else, like let's find, great nonprofits or even profitable companies who have a meaningful cause, and let's just contribute our talent that direction and see what we can build. And it honestly has been so successful. We're continuing to do it. So we're continuing to find nonprofits and other orgs that we can lean into and help out. Because at our size, we wind up with a lot of capacity in between projects. So let's put it to good use.
How does future look like to you for your agency? Where do you see this going? Like where do you want to take it?
It's hard to answer because if you would have told me 10 years ago we'd be a company of almost 100 people now, I probably would have spat out my coffee. I don't think either of us thought we would kind of get to the state that we're at. But now that we're here, I see a unique opportunity for Test Double to be regarded as the premier consulting agency in North America and potentially the world. So I think that there's a lot of work to do between now and then, no doubt about it. But I think if we can continue to find, awesome humans to join our team, if we can continue to, create a more broad and diverse set of offerings and services that our clients need, and if we can continue to be a more diverse company so that we get all of the benefits of problem identification and solutions that those unique perspectives bring, I think we can really be an example for others to follow in our industry. So that's where we want to get to. I think it's hard to, our vision was to get to 150 people by the end of next year, and I think we'll do it. After that, we're probably gonna start taking a deep breath and looking out more like 3-year, 5-year time frame and see what's a good stretch goal from there. I'm not sure exactly what the team will come up with yet.
Some more runs might be in your future for some of those lizard brain moments.
Yep,
I like that phrase.
Yep, that's exactly when the magic happens. So,
well, this was a great chat, Todd. Thank you so much for joining us today and providing some insights. So where folks can find you are on your testdouble.com, your company LinkedIn. You guys are also on the Twitter, if I'm not mistaken, then your personal LinkedIn profile, Test Double Todd. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. So that's it, everyone. If you learned something today, laughed, tell somebody about the podcast. Have a great day. Thanks for listening. Find our other episodes on agenciesthatbuild.com. Plus, we're listed anywhere you find your favorite podcast.